There's a reason you've been feeling restless lately, like you don't fit inside your own life anymore, like you're watching yourself from a distance, going through the motions, but not really present. That disconnection you've been trying to fix, trying to understand, trying to medicate with distractions, that's not anxiety. That's not depression. That's death. Your old self is dying, not metaphorically, not eventually, right now. And this video found you because you're finally ready to stop resuscitating them and let them go. This will find you right before your new self emerges, not when you feel prepared, not when it's convenient, right here in the messy middle, when everything feels like it's ending and nothing new has begun yet. And if you can understand what's actually happening in this moment, if you can see the death for what it is instead of fighting it, everything changes. Let me tell you what nobody's been honest with you about. You're addicted to who you were. And I don't mean that poetically. I mean your nervous system is literally dependent on the version of you that's been running your life for years. Not because that version was happy, not because they had everything figured out, but because they're familiar. Your brain knows how they react to stress. Your body knows how they hold tension. Your thoughts know which loops to run when things get hard. And that familiarity, that predictability, feels like safety, even when it's killing you. Even when you know deep down that version of you is the exact reason you're stuck. You keep going back to them because the known misery feels less terrifying than the unknown freedom. That's the addiction. And until you see it for what it is, you'll keep trying to change your life while staying the same person. And that's impossible, because here's what's actually happening every day. You're not living, you're replaying. Same thoughts, creating the same feelings, creating the same choices, creating the same outcomes. You wake up with the same internal dialogue. You react to the same triggers the same way. You make the same decisions that lead to the same disappointments. And you tell yourself you're working on it. You're trying to grow. You're doing the inner work. But you're not. You're running a recording, a program that was written years ago based on who you had to be to survive back then. And that program is still running, still dictating how you see yourself, how you show up, how you respond to everything. You're not being you. You're being a recording of you. And the most terrifying part, you don't even realize it's happening, because the loop is so ingrained, so automatic, that it feels like identity. Like, this is just who I am. But it's not. It's just who you've been practicing. And here's why that matters right now. In this exact moment, you can't become who you're meant to be while you're still running the program of who you used to be. Those two versions cannot coexist. You can't upgrade the software while keeping the old operating system. You can't pour new wine into old containers and expect them to hold. Something has to die for something to be born. Not improve, not heal. Die completely. So the new one has room to emerge. And every time you've tried to change, every time you've tried to transform, every time you felt that surge of motivation and thought, this time will be different. It wasn't. Not because you didn't try hard enough, but because you were trying to become someone new while refusing to let the old version go. You were redecorating the prison instead of walking out of it. Let me give you a way to see this. There are creatures in nature that molt. They outgrow their shell, their exoskeleton, the protective covering that's kept them safe. And when it's time to grow, that shell doesn't expand with them. It cracks, it splits, and they have to crawl out, vulnerable, exposed, with nothing protecting them while the new shell forms. And here's the critical part. If they don't fully shed the old shell, if pieces of it stay stuck to them, it restricts their growth. The new shell forms around the old fragments, malformed, limiting them. They never reach full size. They stay small, constrained by what they refuse to release. You are molting. Your old self, the shell you've been carrying, it's cracking. You feel it. That restlessness. That sense that you've outgrown who you've been. But you're terrified to crawl out because the moment between shedding the old shell and forming the new one, you're completely vulnerable. No protection, no armor, nothing familiar to hide behind. Just you, raw, exposed, becoming. And most people panic in that space. They try to crawl back into the old shell, even though it doesn't fit anymore. They cling to pieces of who they were because being small and safe feels better than being exposed and growing. But you can't do that. Not anymore. Because the old shell is already cracked. The only question is whether you'll fully release it or let fragments of it deform who you're becoming. And here's the part that makes this so hard. The version of you that's dying, they're not just the bad parts. They're the identity you built around surviving the bad parts. The person who had to be strong because vulnerability felt dangerous. The person who had to be perfect because love felt conditional. The person who had to stay small because shining threatened others. Those versions of you served a purpose. They protected you when you couldn't protect yourself. They got you through things that could have destroyed you. And there's real grief in letting them go. Not guilt, not shame, grief. Because even though they were survival mechanisms, even though they were reactions to pain, they were still you. For years, they were all you knew how to be. And now you're being asked to thank them, honor them, and release them. To let them die so the version underneath all that armor can finally breathe. So how do you actually do it? How do you let the old self die without feeling like you're losing yourself entirely? You start by getting ruthlessly honest about what you're still running. What version of yourself shows up when you're triggered? What story you tell about who you are, based on who you had to be? What beliefs you're carrying that don't belong to the person you're becoming? And here's the shift. You don't try to change those things. You don't force them to die. You just observe them. You watch the recording play without pressing pause or fast forward. You notice yourself reaching for the old reaction, and instead of judging it, you acknowledge it. Oh, there it is. There's the old program, the version of me that learned to respond like this. And in that observation, in that awareness without attachment, something begins to dissolve. Because you can't be aware of the loop and stay in the loop at the same time. Awareness itself starts breaking the shell, not because you're forcing it, but because you're finally seeing what's been invisible. And then you do something that feels impossible at first. You practice being different, not performing different to prove you've changed, not pretending to be different to convince others, actually allowing yourself to think thoughts the old you wouldn't think, make choices the old you wouldn't make, respond in ways the old you couldn't, even when it feels wrong, even when it feels unfamiliar, even when every cell in your body is screaming to go back to what you know. Because that discomfort, that unfamiliarity, that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's the sign the old shell is cracking and the new self is emerging. And emergence is uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like you're losing your mind. Like you don't know who you are anymore. And you don't, because you're not who you were, but you're not fully who you're becoming yet either. You're in the molt, the terrifying space between shells. And this is where most people run back. They crawl back into the cracked shell because the vulnerability feels like death. But it's not death, it's birth. And you can't be born without leaving the shell behind. Now, if this is landing, if you're recognizing that you're in the molt, that the old self is dying and the new one is trying to emerge, I need you to do something right now. Go to the comments and type 4 words. The old me dies. That's it. No explanation, no story, just that declaration. Because when you name it publicly, when you claim it out loud, you're not just acknowledging what's happening. You're giving yourself permission to let it happen fully. You're saying, I see the death, and I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to let the shell fall away. And if you know someone trapped in the old shell, someone trying to grow while clinging to who they were, share this with them. Ask them to declare it too. The old me dies. Because sometimes we need permission to stop being who we've been. This is that permission. Subscribe to stay connected to this movement of people refusing to stay small. If Super Thanks feels right, it directly fuels getting these messages to more souls ready to molt. But real talk, the fact that you're here, letting the old shell crack, I don't take that lightly. You being here is the whole point. Thank you. And here's what happens when you finally allow it. When you stop trying to save the old self and start trusting the emergence of the new one, you become unrecognizable to yourself and to everyone who knew the old version. And some people won't like it. They'll say you've changed like it's an accusation. And you'll look them in the eye and say, I know, without apologizing. Because you're done shrinking to keep others comfortable. You're done performing the old version to maintain relationships that only wanted you small. You're done carrying a shell that doesn't fit because other people recognized it. The new you doesn't need anyone's approval. They don't need validation. They don't need permission to exist. They just exist, fully, unapologetically. And that presence, that authenticity, that's what you've been searching for all along. Not a better version of who you were, the truest version of who you are, the one that was always underneath the shell, waiting for you to finally let the old one crack. Your old self was never meant to last forever. They were a chapter, a necessary one that taught you, shaped you, carried you when you couldn't carry yourself. But chapters end, and trying to live in a chapter that's already over doesn't honor the story. It just keeps you stuck, rereading the same pages, wondering why nothing's moving forward. But you're not stuck, you're molting. The shell is cracking, and the version of you that's been waiting underneath all that armor, all that protection, all that performance, they're ready. They've been ready. They were just waiting for you to stop clinging to the old shell and let them emerge. This video found you to tell you it's time. The old self doesn't need to be healed. They need to be honored, thanked, and released. The new self doesn't need to be created. They need to be uncovered. And the space between those two versions, the vulnerable molt where you have no shell at all, that's not falling apart. That's becoming. So let me ask you something. Before this moment passes, how much longer are you going to try to fit into a shell you've already outgrown? How many more years will you spend trying to improve a version of yourself that was only meant to get you here, not take you forward? The old you is already dying. You feel it. The restlessness, the disconnection, the sense that nothing fits anymore. That's not the problem. That's the process. The shell is cracking. The only question left is whether you'll fight it or finally let yourself emerge. Because your new self isn't coming. They're already here, waiting underneath the fragments of who you used to be. And the moment you stop clinging to the old shell, the moment you let it fall away completely, they'll breathe for the first time, fully formed, fully free, fully you. So what are you waiting for? Permission to stop being who you were? This is it. The old shell is already cracked. Now crawl out and become.